Hey everybody, welcome back to the city of Fremont. This is now episode 6 of the series so far, so thank you so much for tuning in to this episode, and also feel free to check out my other episodes in case you want to catch up on what I've built so far. Not that I've built a lot so far in the city, I mean we're only on episode 6, but I mean, you know, if you're interested, give it a look. But anyway, moving on from that, a little note. Let me just gather what's happening on screen. Alright, I understand now. So, right now I am setting up a little bit of a, little sort of, gosh, what would these be called? I guess a housing complex. I was thinking of saying condo, but that's not really a condo. So, yeah, this is a little bit of a low income sort of housing complex. Again, just like this city, this is also based very similarly off something that can be found in the city that I live in. The position of it in response to the, or in correlation I should say, to the downtown area is pretty similar. So yeah, that's kind of what I went to go and do over here. The main reason that I actually decided to, do this episode as a whole, residential living and whatnot, is that, as you can see, the RCI meter on the bottom of the screen was just nothing but residential. When creating the city, there's just an overwhelming amount of, just an absolutely overwhelming amount of jobs that are available, but yet there isn't any sort of population. There it is. There isn't any sort of population to meet that job demand. So I just basically introduced a couple thousand residents to the city, and as of the latest, the RCI has actually changed, and now they want more jobs, more commercial and industrial. So finally that I've got that issue fixed, that's probably what we'll be focusing on in the next episode. I'm thinking of a distribution center, but we'll have to see. But moving on from that, I kind of just talked over the entire creation of this little housing complex, but it's okay, there's more to be built later on. But right now I am just setting up these little parking spaces. And one thing that I'm going to try and do from now on is instead of using the parking lot decals that don't serve any sort of function, I'm going to try and use the actual parking spaces, because they do serve oh my gosh. They do serve a function, I should say. And well, yeah, that's basically it. They serve a function so vehicles can park outside buildings instead of, lining the street. And not every street is going to have parking along it, because that's what this game likes to do. It likes to make every single street sort of have roadside parking, but that's just not the case in a lot of situations. So I'm going to try and switch it up a bit. For example, there is not any street side parking right along the entrance to the shopping plaza right over there, but there is going to be street side parking on the other side of the road, because that has residential buildings and whatnot. So moving on with that, I am pretty much finished up that that housing complex earlier, not too long ago, and I'm moving on to a little bit of a neighborhood sort of deal over here. This is all made out of just plop down houses and whatnot, and I always start out when making these low residential neighborhoods by putting down these sort of fancier houses that can be found. I guess they had built these fancier houses in the hopes that the land value would go up, but I guess it didn't. So the remaining spaces got filled up by these quote less desirable houses, which are nowhere near as fancy and whatnot compared to the others. But I mean, you can find this again within the city that this is based off of, so I went ahead and just rolled with it. But basically, just putting down these houses and whatnot, just putting them into the empty spaces. I'll go in and use move it off camera to space the houses out even better. Make sure they're not super clustered up on each other. And I'm basically just coming in right over here with the oak trees and the London plane trees. And also these low poly trees as well, so they don't, you know, take up too much memory of the game. And I just fill in these empty spaces between all the houses, and especially in the little grassy area behind each house. Especially right here between the train tracks and the housing. I decided to put an extra space there so that it could dampen the noise whenever trains go down that. When the trains go down that section of track actually isn't connected to the outside connections just yet, so there are no trains coming in, but eventually that will change, of course. Now that we are done with that little neighborhood section, I'm now moving on to a different part of the city. It's a little bit more off to the side, closer to the very first little suburb neighborhood sort of deal that I had built a while ago. Also built that off camera, but you'll get a better view of it later on, I think. Maybe, I'm not too sure. I think the last video, actually, the opening cinematic, like, cut straight through this area, so if you want a better view, because I'm not too sure if this video shows it or not, you could always just watch the opening of the previous video. If it is the previous video, I'm pretty sure it's the previous video. So yeah, this is going to be a, I guess a higher class, sort of, in quotation marks, a higher class sort of housing area. This is going to be, yeah, a more modern take. There aren't any reinforced bars on the windows. This is just a housing apartment complex right along the train tracks, off to the side of the city, not quite in the downtown area, but, you know, relatively close. There's a major roadway that'll take you pretty much straight downtown. All you have to do is, like, make one turn, so again, it's I guess it's pretty fairly well situated. But there is going to be, with this case, a lot of parking. This development that I'm creating right now took a really, really long time to get just right. This, I don't know what it is, but certain builds in this game, they just take a lot of energy and a lot of time to create, and I'm not too sure when each build is going to do this or not, but this was one of them. I wasn't actually too excited at the end that it managed to take up so much time. I cut a really large amount of footage out of this episode, especially from this section alone, so I guess you could be thankful for that. But yeah, there was lots of building or plopping down these houses, then demolishing them, then putting new roads and demolishing them, and it was just a complete mess. But I think I managed to successfully come up with a proper facility. So the condos, or not condos, the apartments, they have these parking spaces outlined in the front. And again, I'm using the actual functioning single parking lots, and if you notice, there is a little bit of a gap between each set of 3. I eventually go in off camera and just use move it to push them together so that gap isn't there, because it was kind of irritating me. But yeah, like I had said before, there's going to be parking spaces all in front of these places. And I use these. I use the default roads. I eventually changed them to the like flat concrete alley. But I'm using the normal roads because they have that white line on either side that perfectly spaces out the lane between where traffic drives. So I just thought that it would be a perfect and simple spacer. Whereas compared to the shopping plaza, again in my last video, I was putting down decals and whatnot to try and properly space it. So I mean, different tactics work in different ways, and that just happened to work pretty good in my opinion. So right over here, I tried to make another extension to the little apartment complex, but for some reason I couldn't get the angle just right, so I had to just quickly cut across the entire like campus sort of deal. And eventually I got that all sorted out, and now I am moving into the final stage of this build and also the final stages of this video. So I think I'm gonna leave right now. There's only about 30 seconds or so left in the video for me to commentate before the closing cinematic. So I'm going to leave you guys right here. I'd like to thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a like, subscribe, whatever you want. I'm not gonna force you, just do it if you feel like it. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. Leave any suggestions as to what you want to see next in this series. My name is Mr. Bluescreen. I don't usually do an outro like this. What am I doing? Gosh, I am such a mess. But I take pride in that. Take care, guys.